In today's episode, we have another installment of the Spotlight Sip, and we will be shining a spotlight on relationships and communication. We have Reverend Dr. Rodney D. Smith back with us to engage in this conversation. It is heartfelt, it is honest, it is transparent, and it is a reminder that communication is at the heart of everything we do, even relationships. So get your sip ready, get your eat ready, and get ready for the communicating heart, navigating love and dialogue. Hello, sippers. Get ready for the S.E.T podcast where we sip, eat, talk, the ultimate blend of flavors and conversations. I'm Gina, your host, culinary enthusiast, and spirited conversationalist. Each episode will explore diverse topics, share laughs, and savor the moment with special guests. Sip on insights, eat up knowledge, and join the conversation. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and YouTube at Sip, Eat, Talk Podcast. Subscribe now for a journey that's as delicious as it is insightful. Let's sip, eat, and talk together. Cheers! Hello, sippers. Welcome to the S.E.T podcast where we sip, eat, talk. I'm your host, Gina. Whether you are sipping on your coffee, tea, favorite champagne, wine, cocktail, mocktail, energy drink, or good old-fashioned water, you are a sipper. You are part of our community. You are sipping it with me, and I'm glad to have you. The audio podcast can be found on 16 different platforms. You can check pod.link for access to those platforms, which include Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Spotify. Be sure to follow us on social media at Sip Eat Talk Podcast on Instagram, YouTube, Threads, and TikTok. Be sure to follow me, your host Gina, on Instagram at I am Gina Gibson. Well, it's time to sip in, and I must tell you, I am not that exciting today, you guys. It is pretty early for me today, and you know what? I feel bad saying that because it's even earlier for Pastor Rodney, who's in California. But this morning, I still wanted to make a little something, and so I made a coconut white hot chocolate. That's right, I made a coconut white hot chocolate with some almond milk. There will be a link in the description for the recipe. It is super yummy and very simple. It was only about 5 minutes to make. And I paired that today with a bowl of strawberries. So I have me a fresh bowl of strawberries here today to balance out the sweetness of my drink. Be sure to tag us at Sip Eat Talk Podcast and let me know what you are sipping and eating on for the episode. I appreciate you guys. I love y'all for sending me pictures of what you are doing when you're listening to the podcast. But guess what, guys? Don't just text it to me. Make sure you tag me on Instagram so everybody else can see it too. All right. So we have an amazing episode today. We have who has seemed to be a favorite for you guys for this first season of the podcast. We have Dr. Rodney back for a spotlight sip today, and we are shining a spotlight on relationships. So get your sip ready, get your eat ready, and let's get ready for the spotlight sip on relationships with Pastor Rodney D. Smith. Cheers! Dr. Rodney D. Smith, welcome back, brother.
What up, G-Rock?
I am so happy to hear you. I have to tell you, your episode was popping. As a first season podcaster, I had the most feedback. 2 episodes, and yours was one of them. So thank you. It was a great conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back. That
But
must mean you like me.
It's about to be good today. I can
Good
feel
and
it.
juicy.
You know what I want to know? What are you over there sipping on today, Pastor Rodney?
I got ginger ale, and
you
what?
get fancy for a Friday. Let me see your ginger ale.
Because I already know what you're thinking. That ain't no ginger ale.
Ain't no Chardonnay. That's not no Chardonnay on the DL.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, well, let's cheers it up for a good episode, Pastor Rodney. Cheers. Yeah. You know what? It's when I started the podcast, the goal was for it to be a reflection of the things that I enjoy talking about with my friends and my different networks, the things that we talk about. And I have to say, relationships my gosh, if I've been out of school, 26 years this year, then I would say our friendship is 27, 28 28 years that we've known each other, we talk about relationships a lot.
Yeah.
And in the journey of knowing someone over 25 years, I've known you from being single to being Pastor Rodney will be married, 20 what years this year?
21.
21. Is it this month?
Yep. May.
Oh,
May
happy
24th.
early anniversary.
Thank you, love.
21 years in your girl single life for 21 years. So that's a wide range of discussion right there.
That's a wide range. I feel you. I
Wide
feel
range.
you. I'm feeling you.
But I would ask you this, because this conversation will be good. I want the heart, and this is just me from where I am and what I've learned and how I've grown over the years. I think the heart and foundation for me when it comes to relationship, like to start, is the communication part. Right. I feel like so many things I've been in and that did work or didn't work. The communication is key. To a lot of it. So I kind of want to start there, because I think whether you're single or whether you're married, would you agree communication is something we all need to be vested in?
I totally agree. And I'm going to start with my first statement to your point about communication and say relationships are risky. And they're risky if we're talking about communication because we have to start with truth and we have to start at a place that we all understand that if we're saying we're starting with communication, and my first comment to you is relationships are risky, it is simply because I'm under the understanding that we are all not good communicators. And I will say to you, after 21 years of marriage, that I have gone in and out of being good at communicating, being great at communicating, being bad at communicating, and completely not communicating. So think about the dysfunction that I am vulnerably telling you that I've gone through in my own personal life. And so it's a risk because you're dealing with somebody who may or may not be able to have the ability to provide that level of communication.
I love this. Like we just coming out the gate.
We in, all right. We ain't taking, we going straight for the jugular.
Slow
That's
grooves.
why. You know, I'm an open book. Let's get it.
Okay. I wasn't prepared for that. And truth, in speaking in vulnerability, I feel like done the same, not being a communicator at all and just a total know-it-all, being terrible at listening to understand, right? Because I heard you, but I heard you to respond, not to understand. And so the ebbs and flows of growing, maturing, therapy. I don't even want to open up that can of worms, but communication has a lot to do with your own traumas, your unresolved traumas, your unhealed, not being healed. And so I feel like the same. I feel like I have done that dance of being great, and even in being in a good space, you can still be a bad communicator depending on what day of the week it is and what's going
Absolutely.
on, right?
Absolutely.
Truth has a lot to do with communication because I think for a lot of us, people don't want to be truthful about who they are or what they're feeling, and something else comes out, or you don't communicate at all. Would you say?
Absolutely. I think that and I have really studied myself to really understand my own relationship journey in the marriage that me and T are in.
Shout out to Reverend Amate Brad
Shout
Easton.
out. Come on, let's come through, Reverend T. Let's go. Yeah. And I, you know, our relationship, and we talk about this, you know, Pillow Talk is such a spiritual journey because you learn so much from Pillow Talk. But we're gonna get to that later, the Pillow Talk, because I got some juice for you on that. But let me just make this one point. There are 8.1 billion people on the earth. Of the 8.1 billion people, 50% of that percentage of people that are on the earth are men, which means that the gap between men and women on the earth is really only about 1 to 1.5%. And I think that there is this fictitious idea or thought about what marriage is and what marriage ain't. And in today's culture, we got to include now even relationships, because relationships and partnerships have become the new word or the new thing for marriage. And I'm not making a point for what your thing is. I'm just making a general statement here. And I think that anybody who's been in a relationship or a marriage with anybody would tell you that if they could go back and have the conversation again, that there's a lot of things that they learned. And to your point about communication, it hits the top 5 reasons why people get divorced. But I think at some point we've got to do a deep dive and really peel the onion back when we use the word communication. What are we really saying? What do we really mean when we say communicate, right? How do you feel about that? What is in that sauce that makes it difficult at times to be with somebody? Because I can say I love you and that means something. I could say I love you and that means something. I could say, you know, I really love you and that means something. I can look at you and that means something. You know what I'm saying? So when we start talking about communication, we tend to think about the verbal, but when you've been with somebody, you start to understand that it's more than just what you say. It's how you say what you say. It's the energy behind what you say. It's the meaning and the feeling behind what you say. And all of us got to be honest with ourselves, G-Rod. That matters. Communication matters.
It does. And to your point, I think what's really important that you said there is that I think what happens in the society that we live in, that I think people let propaganda guide them and not their own inner thing, right? Because it's easy to see somebody or a couple that makes marriage look so great, and now they wrote a book or they got a podcast or they have the show. And I'm not saying that what they have is not of value, but I think when you decide that this is the standard and that you're not in tune with like your partner or that person and what you need communication style and what they need, because that's different for everybody. Because some people, because of their own triggers or trauma or their own platform or foundation for who they are and what best works for them, you can't buy a book or take somebody else's advice and say this is what it has to be. So when you say what is communication, what healthy communication, I think healthy communication is good, is different for everybody. Nicole Bartel, was on our resident therapist. She talked about fighting fair in marriage, right? So setting ground rules. She's like, we have to set ground rules of what that is. And I think even for communication, that's really important, because I've learned just from one, I'm a type A personality, right? I'm
Yeah.
sarcastic by nature, right? I have a legal background where
No
you
way.
always gotta prove a point, and I love debate, right? But I have to be in tune with who my partner is, and if that is something that they, like, they have to be in tune with who I am, like, and know, like, that's me. But I also have to be in tune with, not in this moment, not in these conversations. Like, I don't want that kind of energy. And so I think it's important that people tailor what works for you. And so I would say to you, on the 21, almost 21-year side of marriage, if you could talk to Rodney Smith the day before he got married, what's a key thing you would tell him about communicating in his marriage for it to be successful?
The first thing I would tell me is that you're going to fail miserably. And before you get in your feelings and make matters worse, I would tell me to do, my t-shirt says, Black men need therapy. I would start with therapy. I would start with what I brought to my marriage is the trauma of what I knew or what I thought I knew about what it meant to be a man, right? Don't show your emotions, right? I'm old school, right? So I grew up, the man does this and the man does this and the man shows up this way and the man shows up that way. Let's consider something. As an African-American male, it didn't dawn on me the lack of real relationships that I saw as an African-American child growing up as an African-American male in St. Louis, Missouri, that were whole and healthy. I did not grow up seeing Black men take their wives' hand and walk. I didn't see Black men caressing in a public way the women who they loved. my communication of love was pay the bills,
Okay.
right? Protect the house,
Hmm.
have a strong voice in the things that you wanted to go in terms of your household. But I did not have a real example in terms of the emotional aspect of what it means to be married. So I had to learn that. But in that came the failure of looking outside of my marriage and looking outside of myself for somebody else to make me happy when I did not learn how to show up, not only for my household, not only for my wife, but for myself. And I think if we were to be honest and start with the therapy, that's what I would tell my younger self. Get whole before you fall in love. And I would say that to anybody who is single. I would say that to anybody who is currently married. You're trying to force a happiness that can never happen until you first deal with yourself.
And I like this, right? This is funny because you and I had a conversation about this very recently. Pastor Rodney asks us all the time about relationships. Where I'm at, how you feeling? Where you at, G Rock? Where you at? And I shared a clip with you. I had shared it. I have a group chat with some single friends, and I shared a clip with them. Whoopi Goldberg had trended, and she was talking about relationships, and I'm paraphrasing, but she basically made a comment and said she's not interested in a relationship. She's like, because I don't have that much energy to invest in something. She kind of equated being in a relationship like having to take care of a child. And she was
Yeah,
like, and I don't have that kind of energy to give. And I said it in the group chat, I was like, gosh, I really like understand that, right? Because what I feel like I've run into is like a single person. I feel like it always comes back. It's not just trying to use some new age terms, but it's just knowing and being aware and the fact that we're growing and learning. This stuff always comes back to trauma and therapy. I don't care what anybody says, because
yeah,
what I told you was that as hard as I have tried to work on myself, to grow, to learn, the places where I know I have deficits to try to improve, or just even acknowledge, right, that they even exist. I am not in a space where I want to be with somebody that's not willing to do that. And I feel like in my dating life, that's what I'm constantly hit with, right? I cannot believe in just how much we know, how much education we have, or just the internet or whatever, the conversations that I have to have with Black men that just don't acknowledge
yeah,
therapy, a need for therapy, downplaying therapy, or like nothing's wrong, or you trying to be too deep, or you trying to do that. But it's like so many things from our childhood, our past relationships, our jobs, hell, just being Black in America
yeah,
affects and
yeah,
we need healthy outlets, things to do and to work through that stuff. And so I just feel like, as far as the you know how much I obsessed you've known me through my 20s, my 30s, and almost the end of the 40s, and I obsessed over being married, obsessed, obsessed, obsessed. And I just don't have the energy to want to pour that much into somebody that's not willing. You know what I mean? That I don't
yeah,
want to be a therapist. I don't want to be a nurse. I don't want to be a
yeah,
psychiatrist all the time, because
yeah,
I feel like what you're saying is it's going to keep failing. Because at the most, if you just can just acknowledge, listen here, I got some mama issues. I got some
yeah,
daddy issues. I got some past love stuff. I got a fear about this. I don't do this well. I can work with that. But when you're not
yeah.
in a space you can do that, I don't have the energy. I don't have the energy.
Yeah, I will say the bottom line to a healthy relationship, and I've been a pastor, and I grew up my whole life in the church, and so there's never a time in my conscious life that I don't remember being in church. And so I'm 49 years old, so I've seen it all, heard it all, talked to them all, and have been through it all. It's a real easy bottom line. Y'all write this down. This is going to make half of your viewers mad. The other half is going to set free.
Okay.
And those of you who it makes mad, you're going to have to wrestle with this one fact. And the fact of the matter is, to your point of everything that you just said, G Rock, the only way, and I mean the only way, to have a healthy marriage or relationship, you must be with somebody who is willing to do the work. Period, bar none. Put a period at the end of that. If they're incapable of doing that work, then you and that person is going to be miserable. Because here's the grace of relationships and marriage: you can mess up, you can hit rock bottom, you can always bounce back when two people, and this goes back to the C word, have the ability to come back to communication. Why are we here? Why are you looking outside of this marriage? What? And I tell people this all the time. I've counseled numerous couples. And let me tell you something, G-Rob. Infidelity ain't the reason why people divorce. I need you to get that. I need your listeners to get. People can forgive and get over infidelity. What they cannot get over is, I don't know who you are, and you're unwilling to budge one way or another. And I can't live with that. I want to just give you this general definition of relationship, which is really the state of being connected. And so when we start talking about communication, and we start talking about what I'm willing to give, what I'm not willing to give, whenever you're not communicating, that means you're not connected. And I can be wrong and connect. I can be wrong and connect. I'll tell you this. My daughter does a great job of reinforcing and teaching me at 49 how to love. She's naturally leans into me.
Shout out to Honey Rose.
If we're walking to the movies, if we're doing our daddy-daughter date, she grabs my hand. She puts her head on my shoulder. She consistently reaffirms, you are my daddy, you are my first love, and I am showing you how to love, even if you didn't grow up understanding this. And the first thing that I think of is, whoa, what you doing? Where did this come from? What happened? What you doing, baby? You know what I mean? And it just reaffirms what I'm saying, that she teaches me that I had to do the work to understand my trauma, as well as my wife. Because, I was born in the 70s. How many of your listeners can say, I'm asking this to your listeners. Can you write down 5 African-American couples who displayed to you, even if it was perception, the highest level of love in their relationship? Can you name 5?
What do you mean?
Maybe you have a few that can do that, but how many of us can do that?
What do you mean when you say highest level of love?
Meaning, rather, your perception of what you thought in a good way that meant. Because it's kind of like the Joneses that live across the street. We think that they got it going on and they got all these problems and they, dysfunctional. But I'm not talking about what really is. I'm talking about your perception of those relationships. I'm just talking about simply perception.
I grew up looking at that, seeing that, like watching my dad slap my mom on her booty while she was washing the dishes. My dad was
go ahead, Papa Gibson, let's go.
Yeah, for real. I'm not even gonna say that because she kicked my butt. I'm not gonna say that, but yeah, just growing up from the neighborhood to the church to my mom and dad's friends to my mom and dad's siblings or whatever. Like, yeah, like I almost feel like I have a friend that I grew up with, and we kind of grew up like the same way. And we always make this joke, like the generation of like the men we watch growing up, like sometimes feels gone, because that's the perception I grew up is like the women couldn't even go get gas. Like you had to gas the car up, and she didn't even have to get a license because you was going to drive her everywhere. You know what I mean? And you had the date night, even if it was just something simple like that they did, or even just, like that. I feel like sometimes that affected me in the sense that I romanticized what I thought it was supposed to be. And I've had this conversation with one of my aunts, interesting enough. And I was like, I wish growing up that people, because see, for me in the era, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but we grew up in, like, stuff happened behind closed doors. Parents didn't argue in front of you. They didn't have those uncomfortable conversations. Like if something was going on, you just didn't know. And when I was talking to my aunt, I was like, sometimes I wish you did. No, not the full scope, but because I feel like I romanticized.
Yeah.
Relationship.
I love where you're going. I love where you're going with this. Let me make a statement. Here's my first controversial statement. All right, you ready? Are y'all ready? Your viewers ready? Everybody ready? Here's the first one. Marriage is a contract that deals with negotiation. Marriage is a contract that deals with negotiations. Now, just give me a minute and and then we can deep dive into that. But I'm still on the word communication.
Okay.
When you say I do, you are making a contract with another person that now becomes almost like a business deal.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the problem. When you get into that contract, the disagreements and the dis-ease that we have in our relationship stems from our inability to communicate effectively our negotiations. Let me give you a perfect example.
I like where this is going.
Sex.
Okay.
Well, I thought we were doing it every night, not once a month. Negotiation. Money. When I met you, you said you was going to work at getting your degree and that we were going to make more money, and that money would have created a different paradigm. Negotiation. All right. Why are you getting this attention of social media? Why they DMing you? Well, you're not paying attention to me. And why are you not paying attention to me? Why? Because I'm slacking off on my negotiations. If you were to be honest in your marriage and your relationship, ask yourself, most people in relationships don't even talk about what they're negotiating. That's why most people are so frustrated. And we're not real enough, G Rock, to be honest about where we are. June, you may need physical touch. July, you may need spiritual aspirations. August, you may need to shut the hell up. We're talking about, remember now, we're talking about effective communication. You know what I'm going to say to my wife who I've been knowing? Well, you should know me. You know how many times I've heard that in counseling? You should know me. I thought you knew that about me. Did I have to I hear women and men say this all the time, G Rock. Why did I have to tell you that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Deep dive in that. What does that mean, G Rock? When I say, why did I have to tell you that? What does that mean?
I think that a lot of couples, and it's funny because I have this conversation whether married or not married with friends. Is like, why do I have to tell him that? Why do I have to tell her that? And I think it just reminds us or tells us, people use the blanket term that like, oh, you're not mind readers. Like, but I'm sure after being with somebody for a really long time, as long as you've been with Rev T, like I know that there are probably certain things that y'all know about each other, but it's also giving people grace. Like it's not that I don't want to know, but just how life is life and our things are going, I might have just overlooked something I wouldn't normally overlook. And so you have to speak your truth. But I do understand that gets tiresome, Pastor Rodney, that especially like you said, if you ever put certain things in place, or that is just not something that the person is willing to do, and you're saying the same thing over and over again, you get tired of your own self sounding like a broken record. And so it's like you don't say anything. And so I think that's what it means, is like, why do I have to tell you? Because we want people to be in tune with us, but the reality is you have to. I'm gonna use an example. I have a friend that is something that her partner did since they got married that she just didn't like. And she said, let's say she said something one time during year one of marriage, and then 10 years later, like he still does it, and she doesn't say anything. She was like, but he should know. Because I said that to him. Like, you might have said it just in year one of marriage, but if you don't say it in years 2 through 10, and now you have this big blow up at year 10, and he looking like, and not that I was siding with him, but I'm like, I could kind of feel him, because if you ain't gonna say nothing for 9 years, how you gonna hold somebody accountable for that? You know?
I know exactly what you mean. You know why that happens? Is because when we start, our starting point is to show up as our representatives. Because we've built up an idea that you don't give a person who you just met who you really are. Now, so let's sit in this. I just met you. We're dating for the first time. It's date one. I'm coming to that date already with the mindset of how little I'm going to show up to day one. And why? Because I don't know you. Remember what I said, relationships are risky, right? So I already know me being on this date is a risk. I have a risk of falling in love. I have a risk that we can really like each other. I also have a risk that you might do me like the last person did me. I also have a risk that you're going to be a failure. I also have a risk that I'm going to love you and you won't be able to live up to my expectations of that love. And so I show up as a portion of myself. Now, let's sit there. What if you show up, G Rock, as a portion of yourself, and I fall in love with that one portion?
Slow down. Slow down. Slow down. Wow, say that again. What if you show up, which I think is what happens.
That
Which I
part.
think is what happens, and we let that blind us, right? Because I'm so in love with this 48% that how this other 52% is playing out, I'm not focusing on. And guess what? When we get in a relationship, that 52% is about what's about to irritate the mess out of me because I've been so connected to the 48.
I'm
Oh,
showing up as a portion. I'm showing up as a
that's
portion.
powerful.
And every time I see you from day one, I keep showing up with that one portion
Mm,
because I felt that this portion that I showed up with is what you like. Now I'm 2 years in, I'm a year in, and I'm like, there's 98 portions of me that I
mm.
can't get to because I've got to feed you to one. So I lose myself. I drop out of school. I got 2 babies now. I'm frustrated because I'm working 12-hour shifts because we only dealt with the portion, the small portion. So I think for your viewers and for all of us trying to work, go ahead. I see it on you. Get that point
You know
out.
what? Because I'm sitting here and I'm thinking like if that like I know something that I've struggled with over the year, and you and I have even had this conversation. Like my spiritual gifts, I'm a motivator and encourager, right? So I'm that person that I walk in and a complete stranger just want to tell me their life story, and I'm gonna listen and offer feedback. That's who I am. And I remember you telling me once, like, you really have to guard your heart, G Rock, when you out there dating, like, and you have to be careful. I understand what your gifts are, but love, you have to be very, very protective of your heart. And sometimes you can't give as much as in certain areas in order to protect yourself, although that's who you naturally are and naturally comes to you. And so when I got sitting here listening to you, because I'm thinking about myself and so many other people I know, it's like a little movie playing in my head. And it's like when we meet people, right? So I remember meeting somebody and something tragic had just happened, like in their life when I met them, right? So of course they met the motivator, encouraging. That's what they're attracted to. My gosh, she's such a great listener. She is just so like, nurturing and this, that. And it's like when we're connected wrapped up in that. You know what I mean? Me being this nurturer, this sounding board, this therapist, hell, a mama for all intents and purposes, or whatever. And now we want to be in a relationship and we want to be together, but there's a romantic side of me. There's a side of me that likes to have intellectual conversations,
Conversation.
and
Yeah.
and we haven't done any of that
We ain't
because
gotten to that portion.
and you telling me you're in love with me, but you're really just in love with that
A portion of you.
48.
Yeah. Isn't
You're in
that
love with
crazy?
it. Oh
Yeah.
my God.
That's
That's
good, right? And
that's
it's
good.
good because, and
That's
this
good.
is why we're so off, because most people, I don't believe at this stage, I hear a lot of people say, did I marry? Am I with the right or wrong person? To me, the only thing that really answers that question, G Rock, is my question to couples is, are you with a person that can grow or is willing to grow?
Mhm.
Because the reality is we're not the same people that we were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, right? We're growing. We get different interests. And one of the struggles that I had was holding my wife accountable for what I thought she was supposed to bring to me and not what Rodney was supposed to bring to me. And so, for anybody listening to this podcast, if you are standing in a space that you are unhappy, and you know good and well whether you're happy or unhappy, but you keep waking up, just think about this, G Rock. We are willing to stay in an unhealthy, happy marriage or relationship because we are afraid to do better and that there is better for us. So most people settle with just a portion. Listen to what your girlfriend say. He ain't bad all the time. He's
Mhm.
slapping you around. He talks to you like a dog. He doesn't respect you. And you will hold him up. You will hold her up. That's not about him. It's about you. And most of us are not at a space that we can admit that if it has gone wrong, can I first hold myself accountable for bringing my own joy to the table? I'm gonna tell you something. This is an experiment I want anybody to do who's in a relationship or a marriage. If you really want to see what you got at home, lose 10 pounds. You want to get his attention? Lose 10 pounds. Yeah, lose 10 pounds. Get a promotion on your job. Pick up tennis as a hobby. The hour that you have at home, take that hour back. And I guarantee you're going to get that person's attention. You know what they're going to say? You acting real different. What's going on with you? And you know what your response should be? I'm deciding to choose me and grow. Are you coming with me? Because if not, I'm going to continue to grow. You can stay here. But what we can't do is for us to stay the way we are. Grow. Growth will change the paradigm of any relationship. And you will know without a shadow of a doubt the person that is supposed to be with you, either they're going to nurture that growth or they're going to try to kill that growth. If they're trying to kill that growth, you need to hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road. They hindering your growth. You with the wrong person.
Healthy.
Statistics show that most people that get married the second time tend to do a lot better. Marriages, people who've been married on their second marriage tend to do better. And also,
you told me one time, right?
Huh?
G-Rock. I'm telling you this right now. I never forget. This had to be probably over 15 years ago, because I don't even think I was 40 yet. You were like, I do a lot of marital counseling, and let me tell you who make good husbands: men in their 40s.
I got married younger, so stay with me, which means that to your question about what makes you happy or what, that when you get married younger, you have to work that out in real time. If I got married later, I would have had time to work that out. And I think those are cultural pressures that we have to dispel. You don't have to be married at 21. You don't have to be married at 28. You don't even have to be married at 38. A lot of our perceptions of what we're supposed to do is based off of the cultural norms that we grow up believing, right? There are a lot of men that are single, that in their 40s and 50s, they are completely different men than they would be if you met them when they were in their 20s. I think that when we talk about relationships in general, I would put after communication, emotion would be a close second. And arguably you can even put it ahead of communication. There's a book called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, which deals with the trauma that as African-American people we have 400 plus years after slavery. And I think that this is a topic, G-Rock, and I commend you on having this podcast, because this is a topic we must have in our community. I need everybody to get, we got to understand our relationships. And that's not always romantic, right? There needs to be more brother-sister relationships. There needs to be more father-daughter relationships that are healthy and whole and in alignment. Let me just make this one comment. When it comes to being a Black man living in America, and I know Black women have their own struggles, their own history, their own stuff they got to go through. I cannot tell you the level of trauma that my friends, my family, and people who are close to me have, what you got to get over to show up as even half of a whole person. As even half of a whole person. Because if you grow up in a paradigm where you believe that this is the way you're supposed to show up, and then you get in a relationship or you get in a marriage and you realize that ain't working and that ain't serving nobody and that ain't helping. Because every day we got to go to bed, we feeling something, we thinking something. And every day that God gives us that we wake up, we thinking something and we feeling something.
Can I tell you what's dangerous about that? And I want people to understand that and get that, because I think it's something very dangerous that happens, right? Because say I meet somebody, and if I'm in a space where I feel like, I'm a healthy communicator, and I have healthy relationships with, let's say, my parents or my siblings and the village that is around me. And then I meet somebody who comes from a toxic family environment, comes from a toxic parental child environment, comes from seeing toxic when it comes to the male female relationships. What gets dangerous about that is because I'm going to be on an island looking like I'm by myself. Because if you're that man and you're going to talk to your father to get advice, or you're going to talk to your mother to get advice, or your siblings to get advice, and they like, oh, she crazy. Like, I don't know what she thinking about. I think what's even more scarier in that is that you don't know that you in trauma, and
Mhm.
that the life that you live, like, that's toxic. That's not normal behavior. That's not
Absolutely.
how you should be talking or communicating. Like, that's really unhealthy. But if the people you talk to are
Yeah.
the same way, then you continue moving forward in that. And so I think the danger in that is not knowing it and
Yeah.
not even being able to see it, because the truth is, if everybody you meet, and a lot of times like attracts like, there are so many people that are in toxic relationships that are absolutely in love, Rodney, and
Yeah.
they not having no complaints because they grew up seeing fighting, they grew up seeing cursing each other out and yelling to the top of your lungs.
And they're
And
good. You know why? You know why they can make it? Because their negotiations are intact. That's the
mm,
mistake that most people make. See, being a pastor who's counseled a lot of relationships, most people look at people from the outside and say they ain't gonna make it. Why? Because they arguing, they got
mhm,
all this. They ain't got nothing to do with their negotiations.
mhm,
That's personality, right?
right.
I know folks who fuss and fight all the time and are madly in love and
Happy
ain't
as they
going
want to
nowhere
be.
because their
Happy as
negotiations are
yes,
intact.
happy as they
I
want
want
to
to
be.
beat this thing up. You have, you cannot escape your negotiations.
Mm-hmm.
If I said to you, G Rob, a part of our negotiations is I'm gonna pay the bills. The first time I'm late or the first time I miss, what you gonna feel?
I'm gonna feel like you broke the negotiation because you said you're gonna pay the bills.
Now let's go one more step. What if we never talked about it?
Hey, but Pastor Ronnie, what about the people who have never had these conversations?
Norms, you made an assumption based off of the culture and the trauma that you were raised with, what the negotiations are. And there are 7 out of 10 women and men who are on this podcast who are upset with your spouse, significant other, boyfriend, girlfriend, because you have put a negotiation that y'all ain't talked about.
How do you come back from that? So say you have a couple in your office, they 5 years in.
It's one way, only one way to survive a broken relationship. You gotta be willing to grow. Gotta be willing. If you're with somebody that's is not gonna do the work, I'm saying to you, you're wasting your life. You're wasting your life. The most precious thing that God gave you is your life. And just think about this, G Rock. We are willing to be miserable as long as it doesn't interrupt our lives. Most people will stay miserable because they don't want to interrupt the norm now that they've gotten used to. Interrupt that.
What did you say on the last podcast? There are people whose survival is based on your trauma. It's
Your
based
trauma.
on you being down and based on you not being
I
happy.
just told you,
Yeah.
lose 10 pounds. I want you to think about this because I've seen this happen a million times. When a man or woman
Mhm.
wakes up in the morning and says, I've had enough of this, and they come to that alignment where they say, this is no longer about you, I'm about to get me together. The first thing that they do is get their health right. They either go to the gym, they start walking, they start doing something that has something to do with health, alignment. When the person sees that you're making it, I guarantee you, I put it on my life, lose 10 pounds and see a man that hadn't been communicating with you all of a sudden say something. But what you doing, baby? Why are you walking? You know, you know you're losing weight. You ask the question, if you never had this, how do you get it back? You get you back. Pastor, how do I get back what I never had? Or we're in this funk. Get you back.
You're married and you're in this partnership with this person, you have to give so much of yourself. How do you get back to yourself?
You have to claim the only thing that man has no control over, and that's time, right? So think about this. If we're in a broken, unhealthy relationship, then the only thing at that point that I'm giving to you is time. That's what I mean. What else am I giving to you?
Right.
If I'm in the house with you, that's time. If we ain't talking, that's time. Because here's the thing: the moment I walk into that house, there's a feeling. I tell couples all the time, G Rob, you master the energy of that house.
Mm-hmm.
You bring the energy in, right? So if I got good energy, you got bad energy, it's gonna be bad energy. If I got bad energy, you got good energy, guess what? It's gonna be bad energy. So what is the only thing in this world that I have absolutely no control over? Time.
How do you pivot from that to now pouring into yourself, especially in that space of, I know you said if you're with somebody they don't want to grow, it's time to leave. But I realize that's not that simple, not just in relationships, but in marriage. I realize that's just not an easy thing to do. You got the babies and the children and you've been in this thing for years. How do you pivot to that pouring into yourself?
My entire life, I never realized the value of me because I always valued other people's feelings over my own, right? And that could be family, friends, church. My children taught me how to be a good father by choosing them because for a pastor, when the church has a crisis, you respond to them first and second your family. That's not what I do at this stage of my life. If my family has an event, I don't care what's happening at the church, the family is coming first. Now, stay with me. What I learned from that is that the immediate person on this earth that I am fully responsible for is Rodney Dwayne Smith. And I've never personally been taught emotionally how to choose myself. And I think that you are 100% right when you say there are a lot of things at stake. There is children. I agree. There is a mortgage. There are now negotiables that affect other people's lives that if we break this chain, is going to affect them. Got it. 100 ditto dead on. But even despite that, I am making the argument for us to be whole again, whether we're in a relationship or a marriage or single, we have to find the way to choose us, meaning making us a priority. My biggest fear in my life was dying unfulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
That was like the biggest fear in my life. Like, whatever happens, I can get over it, I can overcome. But just, Rodney, just don't stop breathing if you ain't fulfilled. And when I started making that a priority, it changed how I moved even in my marriage, right? When I think about, yeah, but are you going to die unfulfilled? Is this going to cost you, even though it may affect the family and the home? Because guess what? We at the end of the day, everybody's choosing them. That's been the story of our whole life. The story of our broken relationships, the story of the people who messed up over us, the people who did not value us, the people who did not see us, the people who moved beyond us, the people who were unable to love us, and all of that comes down to one thing. They chose them.
That's powerful.
And think about how great you are. And this, if we're to be mad about anything, you mean you chose over me? Now, how's that working out for you?
How's that working out?
Because there's a lot of people who chose them who has not done the therapy and they're not whole. So they're self-destructive. Which is
That's
self-destructive.
because you can
That's
choose,
why sometimes,
but that doesn't mean you choose yourself in a healthy way.
right. So let's keep that moving. Let's stay here. Right? So that's the surface. Choosing yourself is the surface. But you just said something. Choosing yourself in a healthy way. I'm going to say something I'm being transparent here.
Okay.
There are times in my marriage that I didn't trust myself. My spouse helped me through the distrust that I have for me, or the lack of love that I have for me.
Yeah.
Like, loved me beyond where I was in that moment. That's the give take, right? Because
Stay
I was
stay there for a second.
yep.
This is the part that I feel like, especially for people who are single, people who might be in a relationship that's not working, hearing statements like that, I think people can take and run with something like that, right? Because part of this conversation has to be, when is it healthy and when is it unhealthy to be pouring something into a person? That, to me, that's always been a very fine line. It's something I struggle with, mainly because of my spiritual gifts, because
Right.
I'm naturally a motivator, a helper. That's
Right.
what I do, an encourager. That's what I do. And so when you're in this relationship and you're pouring, right? Because you should pour into your mate, your spouse, your partner.
Significant
That's
other.
a
Yep.
very important thing to do. But it's this conversation I feel like we need to have in there somewhere about, when is it healthy and when is it not healthy? When are you because I call it, I don't mean to make it in like a cavalier way, but I joke, my friends and I have jokes about being in build a man or build a woman project. So talking to the guys, they'll say build a woman, talking to the women, we'll say like build a man, like, and you know that they were project, and I don't know that I always knew that that's what it was. Looking back now, I
Mhm.
can look into that, but I know it's a natural thing to help support your mate or your spouse. But how do you investigate if it's healthy or not healthy?
So when we first started talking, I started by making a statement: relationships are risky.
Mm,
Okay. So when you invest your heart, you're taking a risk because you are investing, meaning that you're putting something into something without a guaranteed return. So if you decide that you want to be in love with somebody or have a relationship with somebody, you're taking a risk.
okay.
Period. Number two, how much of the portion have you given and have you discerned about the person that says the person is worthy for me to keep investing? Stay with me, G Rock.
Okay.
How many millionaires make an investment that fails, come right back and invest even more and fail, come right back and invest even more, boom, and hit the jackpot?
Okay. I hear you.
It is because of their knowledge of what they're investing in.
Mm,
It didn't hit this time, but I'm coming back because I know this investment is going to return good. So relationships are risky.
mm-hmm.
How much of the portion have I discerned about what am I supposed to invest in? Which is why I said you never get a beginning but one time.
Come on now.
You only get one time to be the one first time, right? But how much of the person, how much of a portion of a person has that person shown you to say, this person is worth risk, this person is worth investing in, even though he ain't where I need him to be? What my wife did for me was, I've seen enough of his potential to know that even though Rodney is not showing up his best, I'm going to keep investing.
That's right.
That's it. It ain't deep. It's not even rocket science. It's just, I've discerned enough about you
Mm-hmm.
that you foul, you blew it, you're messing up, you're not showing up, you're not emotionally invested, but I'm going to keep on investing in you. When I'm saying choose you, to our earlier question, I'm saying, can you choose you despite the investment?
Mm. Can you choose you despite the investment? Woo!
Because the more I grow, the more I improve myself, the more attractive I become and the happier I become. There's a study now, I believe it's somewhere in Japan, they have the most centenarians on the earth. And they've done research. There's even a book and a whole movement
Oh yeah, I
about,
just recently read. Am I saying it right?
yep,
IKIYAI. They have
yep,
the most people
centenarians on the
found one in
earth.
the world.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And so a part of that study and a part of that survey is researching what makes people happy. And
Mhm.
so me and you have grown up in the culture where it was told to us certain things are going to make you happy, right? Number one, go to school, get your education.
Mhm.
That's going to make you happy. All right, viewers, How many of y'all happy because you got a degree?
All right. Come
Come
on
on, keep
now.
it real, right?
Yeah,
All
for
right.
real.
All right.
Mhm,
After you get your degree, go to grad school or get a job. All right.
mhm,
Then it's get married, right?
mhm,
How is that working out for us?
mhm.
I mean, if we having a conversation about relationships, love, and marriage, let's keep it a buck. How is that working out? Because there's a whole bunch of jokers that ain't happy that got all of that.
Mhm.
So then I gotta ask you about you. I gotta
Okay.
ask you about you.
Oh,
Because if
wow.
you
Back to
if you
you.
can check off everything on the list that was supposed to make you happy and you ain't happy yet, then where else are we supposed to go?
Right. It all comes back to you, huh?
It comes back to you. So my argument is
Hmm.
relationships are risky. And if you are in one that is in a dangerous place or unhappy place, and
Mhm,
you are debating whether or not you should invest more in it, my
mhm.
question to you is, has the person that you are investing in, is that a good investment? And don't answer that with your ego
Mm. Don't answer with your ego.
because you're trying to save face because of what you think people are going to think about you. Some of you need to get out of that relationship because there's a better one for you in your future. Some of
Mhm,
you need to stay with your relationship and invest more. The pastor can't answer that. G Rock, I don't think you can answer that.
mhm.
You have to be honest with yourself and discern for yourself. That's what we want. We want people to make decisions for us. Pastor,
That's
you got to
okay. We
come up.
want to read the book and get the answer, and this is
No,
the
I can't.
this
I
is the
can't make that
answer.
decision. I
Right,
can't
right.
make that decision. Let me tell you something. You've known me a very long time, and I want to be transparent because my whole thing is helping people. And me being a pastor, I know that comes with a stigma. I know that comes with what you think it is and how you think I'm supposed to move and who you think I'm supposed to be. But let's have a real conversation for your viewers. For everybody around me, my job is to lift them up, to pray for them, to make them believe, right?
Right.
That ain't got nothing to do with me as a husband.
Mm.
I can be a great pastor and a poor husband, or I can be a great father and a poor husband.
Mhm.
Right.
Right.
And what I would do is attach my relationship as pastor to my relationship with my wife. Ain't the same thing, bro. Ain't the same thing. Ain't the same thing. Sorry. We
Yeah.
love pastor, but ain't nobody married to pastor.
And that's a very interesting thing because I have found over the years that like you have this amazing friend, like they are amazing. They are so dope. Like you're not gonna hear me say nothing ill about them, whatever, whatever. And you want to hook them up with somebody, you want to connect or vice versa. And it's like who you are with your friends, who you are with your family, who you are at work or professionally is not who you're gonna be in this relationship.
Mm-mm. Two
Right?
completely
Two
different worlds.
completely
Two completely
different
different
things. Oh
worlds.
my God, I'm so shocked. No, no, not them. No, they're
Not
not.
them,
They're
right?
not. That's not who they are. But relationships stirs a whole lot of other stuff that doesn't get stirred in friendship or with
Come
your niece,
on.
cousin, or your next door neighbor. It's so different.
It's so different. And I tell people, G Rock, and you've heard me say this. I've said this to my congregations. If me and T ain't talking, relax. If she, I mean, seriously, like it's so like, oh, did you see what she posted on Facebook? Like I had somebody inbox me, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Why?" Because T posted something, and I was like, "For real?" This makes you start cutting Negroes off.
Mm,
If you're going to be in a relationship and you're going to be in a marriage, stop judging what you think that is
okay.
because you ain't in it. And
Hmm.
your assumptions, you way in left field putting projections on people, and that ain't even like you way wrong.
Yeah.
Here's the bottom line. You're going to go through something.
Hmm.
Period. Did y'all get that? I ain't getting ready to wake up every day and be slapping my baby on her behind. That ain't life.
Right, right, right,
Our
right.
negotiations was off this morning. I
Hmm.
didn't wash the dishes, so she mad. Okay, that's all it was. You know what I mean? Like we have to give people the freedom to be them, and I think that's why people are so frustrated to tell their truths because people don't know what to say, when to say it, who to tell, how to tell, because they're always afraid of being judged and being ostracized and preached to.
Right.
So let's help us all. Listen, if you are in a relationship with anybody, you're gonna go through stuff. You ain't gonna be talking at times. Y'all gonna have to, come back to the table, renegotiate. It comes down to one thing: investment, negotiations. That's two. And three, relationships are risky. If you don't, do not get in a relationship if you don't want to take risks.
I
Because
tell somebody relationships is like it's a roll of the dice. You can put all these precautions and you can read this book, you can take this class, you can go to therapy, you can
none of
try
that
to
works.
you can try to break this trauma, break this generational curse. It is like
You still
rolling the
meet the wrong person.
dice. Oh no, you
Still meet
don't.
the wrong person. You know why? Because the only person who I can control is me.
That's right.
I can't control her.
That's right.
And the older I got in this relationship, the more I wanted to see her thrive in public areas. I love to see my wife operate where she's getting the attention.
Mm-hmm.
I love to see how other men in the church and in the community and even at school respond to T, because T has a very bubbly personality. That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't make me feel no way. I love to see when a woman is in her bag and operating in her gifts and standing on her square and being what God has called her to be. Because for me, I've always been the center of attention because I'm a pastor. So
Right.
when I get to step back and watch her get in her bag, and people be like, trying to throw little things, and I'd be like, dude, this 21 years, like, ain't nothing somebody gonna say to me at this point that I don't know. And
Right.
likewise to her,
That's a
I
very
know my
mature
weakness.
thing. That's a very mature thing, Rodney D. I'm telling you, that is a very. I think a lot of the problem with communication is my brother told me something once, and I remember I was like, and I'm like, he was joking, but low key he wasn't joking, right? And he said, and this was I had probably was in my 20s at the time, and he said to me, he was like, you gonna stay single? He's like, you know why? Because you ain't jealous. He's like, you
I
ain't jealous.
love it.
Like,
He
oh,
said
go
you ain't jealous.
not jealous. He said, you like go on a vacation.
I
Go
used
to
to be like that.
he said, I don't want that. They want to know that they out there. You worried about where they are, where they at when they come. I'm just not built that way. I'm
I'm
just
with you, G-Rock. Well, let
not
me take that back.
built that way. I'm just not. I know people be like, first of all, if anybody is a little bit the speedy road runner that I am, that just has never bothered me. And like you said, the whole representative thing, I'm gonna tell my whole truth. You know, Rodney D, I definitely can be feeling some type of way, but I'm so dang on prideful. I'm not about to let you know I'm sweating about nothing. I'm just
But that's
not
my job. That's
built
my
that
job as
way.
a man to bring it out. And that's see, I told my sons this. I grew up in an era where you had to have game, right? If you were going to get a woman, you had to talk. You had
Mm,
to have something that was going to get her. They don't have to have game today.
no,
They DM.
no. I met a man that told me he has never, and I believe him. I believe him, knowing him now, as long as I have. He was like, I have never actually pursued a woman. I was like, but I've always attracted aggressive women. He was like, and I never had to like ask somebody for their phone number or try to work my way and get the courage to whatever. He was like, I've kind of always attracted women that have done that. Like, oh, you gonna call me or here's my number or whatever.
Believe that. But I also believe, going back to like the whole communication thing and the whole growth thing, my wife grew up as an athlete. She ran track. When T gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning and goes out to work out, I don't go the first time. She does it for a week. Now I'm up at 5 o'clock looking at her like I'm about to get my blankety blank up because my baby going to work out, and I'm sitting here looking like Zip Head Fred. And then T's body gets tight real quick. Man, that child walked in the house and I looked at her and I told her flat out, I'll be in the gym next week with you.
Right.
Growth deuces growth. And I hope you guys are connecting to that. That's why I keep saying, if you want to get a different result, what you're doing ain't working, right? You got to decide, I'm going to grow. Either one or two things going to happen, G-Rock. Either I'm going to grow with you and we going to get our stuff together. Because guess what's going to happen? If you disappointed when we together, right? You disappointed in me. I'm failing. I'm not meeting none of our negotiations, negotiables. I'm just straight out, you're miserable. Then you wake up one day as a woman and say, you know what? I've given all I can give. I've invested all I can invest. I'm going to choose me and I'm going to start growing. You start growing. I'm looking at you growing. I'm going to say to myself, she's growing. Let me get with the program. It's either one or two things going to happen. I'm going to outgrow you and get the emotional investment to leave you, or you going to come along and get better. That's when you hear people say, you know what? I decided I'm done because now I done built myself up. Now I have the emotional strength to leave you. See, that's what you don't want. That's what you don't want. You don't want me to fool around and grow to the point where I realize, oh, I can get my time back and I can do this without you.
Yeah. This is so good. This is so good. Can we do a part two?
We gotta do a part two.
I think the last time supposed to be part two, but I mean a part two to relationship.
A real part two, because we gotta break. We only talked about communication today.
I do feel like we really talked about communication. It's one thing I want to shout you out. That's how much you've been sowing into my life over the years, even though it didn't happen, but many moons ago, I thought that I was getting married. You remember that time? You remember the book that you told us to read?
I don't. What did I
You told us to read the 5 love languages.
The 5 love languages.
Yes. I think that was the first assignment.
Yeah.
Changed my life. Changed my life. And so I think the concept I still believe to be true. And to be honest, although in talking to my relationships, I thought I was moving towards marriage with that person, and that's why I was reading it. That book helped me the most in my relationship with my dad.
Wow.
That's helped me the most in my relationship with my dad. It was a pivotal change and moment for my understanding of him as a woman. And I would like to leave our listeners, if you never did it or even taken a test, the concept behind the 5 love languages is that you need to know what your partner's love language is, because a lot of times we love the way that we want to be loved, and you're getting frustrated because like mine is most people know I'm a talker, is affirming, right? That's my love language, but I do score high all quality time. There no words, that conversation, everything flowing away that's what I feed off of. But if I'm in a relationship with somebody, one of the other ones is like physical touch or gifts or like acts of kindness, something like that, but I'm loving them with words and that's not who they are, then we're not in sync. And I'm getting frustrated because I'm like, I'm giving you my best. This is but that is really important in understanding, because I know that I love with words and I want that, but I need to understand, again, communication, where the other person is. And if they're a quality time person or they're a gift person, that's like important to know. So I would suggest to anybody who's never checked out that book, I think the principles behind it are sound, because that's just another way of getting in tune with your communication and how you express yourself, which I'm sure you've learned over the years in your own marriage.
Absolutely.
Like sparks the person. And so I just want to thank you for that good nugget.
Now, let me say this, Rod, just in conclusion to part one. I hear a lot of African-American people talking about therapy. I would also prescribe to your listeners to get relationship therapy, because you asked me earlier in this conversation about like, what would I do or where would I be at in my 20s? And I prescribe that you get some relationship therapy, because I think talking to an outside person and getting you, the person, to see that there are other choices you can make, I think is valuable, because sometimes we feel like we're at a dead end place. Like, I got these children, I got this job. I know somebody listens like, yeah, that sounds good, but I can't make those decisions. That's why you need to get therapy to do the work, so that you can get in a healthy space to grow and be happy and live the life that God has chosen you to live. Thank you, G-Rod.
I appreciate you. It was a good conversation. I cannot wait to get you back for relationships part 2.
What's part 2? What are we going to talk about part 2?
Woo, that's a lot of pressure. We need to sit in that.
Ask your viewers. What do y'all want us to talk about?
Gosh, you like that? Yes, let's ask the viewers. What do they want to talk about in the part 2?
Can they comment? Can they put it in the comment line?
Let's do it. Yes, that's what we'll do.
Put it in the comment line, and let's do a survey. What y'all think? What y'all want to hear us talk about part 2?
What do you want to hear talk about in relationship part 2? Rodney D, I love you. Tell Rev T I love her. I miss her. Mwah, mwah, mwah.
Peace.
Woo! Well, there you have it, sippers. Another episode, another edition of the Spotlight Sip. Pastor Rodney is my brother. I love and adore him. I appreciate my friends and the transparency that we have in our conversations. That is just a look into some of the things that we sit around and chat about. I appreciate you all for listening. Remember to follow us on social media at S.E.T Talk Podcast. Follow me on Instagram at I am Gina Gibson. And remember, life is too short for bad vibes and bad drinks. So keep sipping, keep chatting, and always remember life is a journey, but it's better with a sip and a chat. Until next time, cheers. Thank you, sippers, for joining the S.E.T podcast where we sip, eat, talk. If you've enjoyed our flavorful conversations, don't miss out on future episodes. Subscribe now and follow us on Instagram, at YouTube, at Sip, Eat, Talk Podcast. Let's continue to sip, eat, and talk together. Until next time, cheers.